Welcome to Juicin with Julia, where we discuss how human rights and literature interact. I'm Julia Buck, and today we're going to explore Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale, which questions our ideas of the right to freedom of speech. The Handmaid's Tale acts as an unsettling illustration of the fragile state of human rights in a society where the difference between fact and fiction is unclear. The representation of Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is at the center of this terrifying story. The article reads, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers." We'll examine the ways that The Handmaid's Tale questions our view of free speech throughout this episode. We'll talk about the similarities between Gilead government and actual restrictions of free expression, and we'll look at how literature can be an effective way for drawing attention to violation of human rights. Today, I have 3 interviewees ready to express their view of Article 19 being violated in Gilead, along with my view on the topic. Starting with my own view, I believe Atwood uses dialogue the best to show violations of Article 19 within The Handmaid's Tale. In The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood effectively utilizes dialogue to highlight how freedom of expression is restricted in Gilead. When the main character, Offred, considers her limited life, she says, "We were the people who were not in the papers. We lived in the blank white spaces at the edges of print." Page 57. The elimination of human voices and experiences is perfectly captured in this phrase, which is clearly opposed to Article 19's declaration of the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas. Offred's response, which mirrors the censorship and control that impacts Gilead, are addressed to the oppressed and silent people whose stories are thought not to be worth telling. Furthermore, through character-to-character dialogue, such as the commander's unsettling declaration that better never means better for everyone, it always means worse for some. Page 211. Atwood emphasizes how those in positions of authority use speech to maintain injustice. This passage perfectly captures the underlying injustice and inequality of Gilead's government, which benefits a select few privileged people at the cost of most of those without a voice. Atwood exposes the subtle methods in which freedom of expression is restricted by revealing the false language employed to defend injustice. Expressing Article 19, the dialogue is an example of what happens when free expression is restricted. A comparison to a real-world example would be the oppression of people in North Korea. Like North Korea, we observe comparable restrictions on the right to free expression. All media and public conversation are strictly regulated by the government in North Korea, guaranteeing that only narratives authorized by the state are shared. People who speak out against the dictatorship run the risk of losing their lives due to the harsh penalties given out for their resistance. This harsh reality is similar to the harsh environment shown in The Handmaid's Tale, where any opposition to the present state of Gilead is met with immediate suppression. Article 19 is crucial for protecting fundamental human rights, since, in North Korea, many people are denied the freedom of expression just as much as Offred expresses the lack of her voice. For my first interviewee, I have Rita Yaming, ready to express her view.
I believe Atwood best utilized characterization to demonstrate violations of Article 19 within The Handmaid's Tale. Firstly, Atwood utilized allusion and indirect characterization to demonstrate how media is used to manipulate freedom of expression. While the ants were informing the handmaids about the Beatitudes, Offred acknowledges that they added, "Blessed are the silent." I knew they made that up. I knew it was wrong, but there was no way of checking. Atwood utilizes a biblical allusion to the Beatitudes, which were 8 declarations of blessedness from the Bible. But "blessed are the silent" is not an actual beatitude. Offred discusses the fabrication when she states that she knew they made it up, but there was no way of checking, characterizing how the handmaids have limited access to media and are unable to check the factuality of information. Atwood uses the biblical allusion of the pseudo-beatitude, "Blessed are the silent," to indirectly characterize how Offred's voice in society is limited by her access to media, elucidating the violation of Article 19's call for the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Through Offred's inability to fact-check the Beatitude, Atwood portrays how knowledge is manipulated through limited access to media and distortion of religion, therefore minimizing her ability to speak out against injustice. The alteration of information and constrictive regulation on expression best reveals how Atwood used characterization to reveal the violation of Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19. Another example is through indirect characterization and anaphora. Atwood further portrays how the media can be used to hinder the freedom to hold opinions without interference. When Janine is recalling a story of being gang raped as a teenager, Offred comments how the handmaids responded that it was her fault, her fault, her fault, her fault. We chant in unison, later forcing Janine to adopt this belief as well. Atwood utilizes anaphora when the handmaids chant her fault regarding what happened to Janine, indirectly characterizing how Gilead psychologically drills Janine and other handmaids to conform to this mainstream system of one singular belief. Atwood uses the anaphora to indirectly characterize how Janine and other handmaids are unable to hold their own opinions and beliefs without interference due to indoctrination, displaying a violation of Article 19. Utilizing anaphora, Atwood portrays how indoctrination separates an individual from their personal opinions by using verbal media to conform everyone to one central dogma. Through this indirect characterization, Atwood displays an interesting violation of Article 19 and its beliefs regarding interference on one's own right to seek information. An interesting real-life example is the Israel-Hamas war and the limitation of freedom of expression within the region where the war is occurring, displaying violation of Article 19. We believe this violated the ideas of Article 19 to seek information without interference. Arrests are being used to silence those that speak out on social media rather than their true purpose, and social media is being heavily filtered to exclude any information regarding the war. This demonstrates abuse of the fine line between safety and freedom of speech, and how that leads to the minimization of the basic human right to speak out and voice one's own opinion. And this demonstrates a violation of Article 19 as it inhibits the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information without interference.
How do you believe the characterization of Moria represents a violation of Article 19?
That is such an interesting question. I believe Moira is such an interesting character due to her progression or regression from a strong and determined character in the face of the oppressive nature of Gilead to someone who just went along like everyone else. I believe her progression is in line with Article 19's insistence that there is freedom to seek, impart, and receive information without interference. When Offred comments that Moira is now frightening her because what she hears in her voice is indifference and a lack of volition, Atwood portrays how Offred witnessed the change in Moira's character due to her compliance. Moira had her personality altered and conformed through Jezebel's, her time there, and interaction with Gilead. She was robbed of her determination and desire, more importantly, to use her voice and speak her mind, a basic human freedom, demonstrating how the characterization of Moira represents a violation of Article 19, due to the change in Moira's character from someone who was determined in the face of adversity to someone who continued to go along with it.
Now, please excuse this small pause for the first advertisement.
Do you want smooth, silky skin? Like butter? Want it compact too? Look no further than the all-fresh body butter. It's travel size and even fits in your shoe. It gives you a silky, soft skin, including many peptides to make your skin look younger. Your skin will be as soft and healthy as a Galilean baby, which you really should have by now. With our special formula, you will smell as good as the fresh bath you get once a month. Get your coupons from your Marthas in order now.
And now for the second interviewee, I have Allison Radu, ready to express her view.
Thank you, Julia. My name is Allison Radu, and I will be doing the symbols from The Handmaid's Tale. So the first symbol I want to talk about is the ants. The ants represent another authoritative power meant to suppress and reteach the women of the new Gileadian society. So the quote I chose was from Aunt Lydia, and she exclaimed, "There's more than one kind of freedom, freedom to and freedom from." Atwood 24. Aunt Lydia explains to Offred and the other handmaids that they in Gilead have freedom from compared to freedom to. Freedom from, in this statement, means not being able to express themselves fully, as the handmaids are shielded from the truth of society through the aunt's teachings. This goes against our chosen article, Article 19, because it denies the girls the privilege to express their opinions in regard them without any blocking frontiers. The aunts impact the story because they establish the fact that freedom to for woman still exists within the aunt's role, freedom to indoctrinate and freedom to control. This power structure is significant because it establishes that woman can oppress other women in the Galilean society. This creates cognitive dissonance because the aunts want to take away power from the woman and indoctrinate them into objects. However, the aunts are women and don't have to follow these rules themselves. This creates immense hypocrisy within the structure of Gilead. The next symbol I want to talk about is the faith pillow. And the quote I chose was, "Faith is a faded blue, the leaves of the lilies a dingy green," Atwood 57. The pillow throughout the book literally symbolizes Offred's faith in the Galilean society. She sees the pillow as rough and faded to represent how she has little faith in herself to have a better life as a handmaid and as a woman. Further, the word faith is the only written word that Offred has access to in the beginning of the story. This shows how although Offred has been indoctrinated and repetitively told she has no freedoms, she can still read and express her opinions in her own mindscape. Her ability to read is significant because it is seen as a way of rebelling against the society of Gilead. Further, the pillow is a symbol of how society wants to limit women and limit their mental capacity. This connects to Article 19 because it shows how although her sources of media have been blocked on multiple frontiers, Offred still proves she can read, showing the faults of indoctrination in the Galilean society. For my real-world example, I have Selena Gomez and how she made remarks regarding the Israel-Gaza crisis, and she stated she would not choose a side to stand with, and she would not put out any biased statements. There was major backlash against Gomez because people believed she should use her platform to speak out in support of one of the sides. This controversy is significant because it shows her power of choice. Some people might believe she is taking her platform for granted because in places like Gilead, you do not have the opportunity to even have a choice. So with the choice and influence Selena has, some believe that she was being ungrateful with her power. This concept could be considered harmful to society because it establishes the higher-ups might not use their platform or status for the good of the community to spark change and inspire new beginnings.
What does Jezebel symbolize within the Galilean society?
That is a good question. So, in The Handmaid's Tale, Jezebel's was the club where the commanders or high-ranking men would go for fun, and working ladies of the night of Gilead would provide their services. The quote I chose to represent them was said by Moira, and it is, "I had my choice," they said, "this or the colonies. Well, shit, nobody but a nun would pick the colonies." Atwood 249. So this quote references this or the colonies, showing how working at Jezebel's was that of an equal punishment to death in the colonies with the toxins in the slow and painful death. This shows how the position at Jezebel's was taken seriously, and it was meant to be a punishment, not a way to express freedom. Jezebel's is another symbol of repression for women in the Galilean society. The women are providing another service to the commanders, much like the handmaids. However, they differ from the handmaids because with Jezebel's, the expression towards the commanders is more of a performance with the makeup and the costumes, rather than a ceremony like the handmaids. Although some of the women were lesbians, they were somewhat free to express their values. They still had limited values and limited mental capacity with the indoctrination of the society due to their purpose of serving the commanders, showing their limited voice.
Now quickly, what is your favorite symbol in The Handmaid's Tale?
Ooh, my favorite symbol from The Handmaid's Tale, I think, would have to be the flowers in Serena Joy's garden. The flowers symbolize life and growth, and the flowers within the garden represent the fertility of the handmaids, and they mask Serena's infertility. This symbol is my favorite because it shows how Serena is standing over the flowers, showing how she has the power to step on them and kill them or let them grow, much like how Serena had the power to belittle Offred and push her to the brink of death, or she could choose to help her and create a child for the family.
Please excuse this pause for our second advertisement.
Have you ever struggled to read hidden Latin inscriptions inside cabinets written by previous handmaids? Want to expand your linguistic horizons beyond reading a pillow that says faith on it? Well, Duolingo has partnered with the Galician Center for Actual Education to bring you Latin classes. These include grammar, vocab, all the different tenses, the meaning of all those cliched Latin phrases that almost follow you everywhere you go, including but not limited to carpe diem, seize the day, veni vidi vici, I came, I saw, I conquered, and non illegitimi carborundum, don't let those bastards grind you down. That's right, that's actually how you say your fave Latin inscription that represents the handmaid society to not be objectified by society. You can do your Latin at any time, like right after you finish off those yummy canned pears. So carpet donut and sign up today. Stay consistent and do your lessons every day for the best results. Remember, Latin or famine.
And for our last interviewee, we have Andrea Comerford, ready to state her view.
The violations of Article 19 in the Declaration of Human Rights was predicted in Margaret Atwood's book, The Handmaid's Tale, through the literature technique imagery. Margaret Atwood showed the restriction of expression through the kinesthetic imagery of Offred preventing herself from expressing emotions. On page 146, Offred, unable to control her emotions, she reacted physically. I crammed both hands over my mouth as if I'm about to be sick. Dropped to my knees, the laughter boiling like lava in my throat. I crawl into the cupboard, draw up my knees, I'll choke on it. The use of simile, the laughter boiling like lava in my throat, Offred conceals what is usually attributed to positive emotions, laughter, as a negatively perceived action. The unfamiliar emotion within her society is seen as dangerous, shown through its representation of lava, further shown when Offred worries the consequences would be a needle, a pill, it would be fatal. If she was caught laughing, the restriction of expression of emotions in her society affects the level of depth and understanding in the formation of interpersonal relationships, along with the ability for someone to feel control within their own body through understanding themselves. Further, within the book, on page 184, Margaret Atwood shows the effects of restriction of retaining knowledge through literature, through kinesthetic imagery. When Offred is given the opportunity to read with the commander, Offred read quickly, vigorously, almost skimming, trying to get as much into my head as possible before the next long starvation. If it were eating, it would be gluttony of the famished. If it were sex, it would be a swift figurative stand-up in an alley somewhere. The usage of metaphors used to describe how Offred feels. Reading shows the perception of society, how it puts reading on a pedestal, a lucrative act shown in the metaphor gluttony of the famished, an act of greed or fulfillment shown through the opposing terms. Also shown as a rebellious act through the metaphor, if it was sex, it would be swift stand-up in the alley somewhere, a rebellious act at the time because in Offred society, sex was restricted, only used for the purpose of reproduction, though Offred's perception of the restriction of literature saw literature as more appealing due to its restriction. As a whole, Gilead was affected as a society because individuals couldn't gain knowledge about the external world and or feel confident in their own thinking and ideologies without the support of literature.
Is there restrictions on literature in society today?
Yes, specifically seen in the school and educational system, there's been an increase of censorship of books in the recent years in the U.S., specifically seen in 2022 and 2023. Looking into the fall semester of 2022, according to the American Pen, who states it's that 70% of parents do not support these bans, which is interesting because that would mean the school system wasn't following the mainstream collective beliefs of society on the topics being censored, which majority are targeted at stories about and by people of color and in the LGBTQ plus communities, which restricts those of school age aged kids the access to books that give them multiple perspectives and knowledge, along with discriminating against those of color and part of the LGBT plus communities. Lastly, where the banning and censorship of books is most prevalent is in Texas, Florida, Utah, and South Carolina. Also stated by the American Pen, these bans are driven by the influence of local actors and state-level policy, overall bringing into question if you had power, wealth, and wealth is more influential on the school system than the collective belief systems found in the majority of society.
Thank you to our 3 interviewees. As we come to the end of this episode, we keep in mind that The Handmaid's Tale is a story about the limitations of humans' rights, including freedom of expression, in addition to being a work of fiction. Margaret Atwood challenges us to consider the impacts of remaining silent and supporting injustice through compelling language. We are forced to face that harsh reality of cultures in which the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information is constantly controlled by making connections to actual cases. Let us learn from The Handmaid's Tale and continue to stand up for Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as we face the challenges of our own reality. Come back soon as we continue this series, but until then, you're listening to Juicin with Julia.